Hello and welcome to the Convex Conversation with me, broadcaster Helen Foss-Barrow. Growing up, Sahar Hashemi bought into the myth that entrepreneurship and creativity was reserved for special people, perhaps like Richard Branson, and she wasn't one of those. But today we'll find out how a trip to New York and a love of skinny lattes led to Sahar leaving life as a lawyer and starting Coffee Republic, the UK's first US-style coffee chain, with her brother Bobby. Together they grew it from the kitchen table to 110 coffee bars before eventually selling. Sahar shares her rejections, breakdowns and breakthroughs going against the grain in a tea-drinking nation in her best-selling book, Anyone Can Do It. Honest insight which has encouraged thousands of people to take the leap, like Sahar and Bobby did. Now she's a consultant, mentors other business leaders, and is passionate about championing female entrepreneurs through the organisation she founded, By Women Built. Sahar, as an optimist and an enthusiastic coffee lover, it's wonderful to have you here today. Thank you so much for trekking across London, actually, to be in the studio.
It's lovely, and thank you for inviting me.
I'd love to start off by asking you, why did you think that you weren't the right person to be an entrepreneur?
Helen, it's interesting listening to your introduction, because it's not like I didn't think I could be an entrepreneur. It just wasn't even on the table, the idea of it. It just wasn't an option. I didn't even think about it. So it's perhaps wrong to think I believed in the myth, which I've always said, that entrepreneurs are special people. It just didn't feature in my world. There were no entrepreneurs. So I didn't even think I'm not going to go into entrepreneurship. At that time, especially when I was growing up in the 80s, you don't really talk about entrepreneurship as an option, do you?
No, you don't. It wasn't raised by my career teacher. And in fact, when I said I wanted to work in television, my careers teacher said, people from the northeast of England don't work in television. You should be a teacher. But there was no mention of business or starting your own thing.
You went to work for someone. You were a lawyer, an accountant, a designer, an architect, but definitely never you will go and start your own business.
Do you also think, Sahar, that in those days we thought work was work and that you choose a job, you choose a career, perhaps you become like you did, a lawyer, you work for 40 years, you get a gold carriage clock at the end, and then you start having fun when you retire?
Yes, I think it was very much what I saw with my dad, who was a corporate person, and you were meant to go to an office. And in my case, we were immigrants. We came from Iran to the UK. And so there was always that idea that we had to really belong and do something stable and secure. So it was going to be an accountant, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a banker. It was very stereotype, I suppose, immigrant stuff, you could say. So no, I just never even thought the concept of having fun at work or expressing your true self, or in what line of business would you be your real self, was just absolutely never even a question. And it is extraordinary now that we talk about it to see how we didn't even think about it. It was just not an option on the table.
And indeed, you went on to be a lawyer, which is interesting for me to imagine now, knowing you a little bit and how enthusiastic you are and effervescent and your personality. Looking back at that, with the benefit of hindsight, was that a completely wrong option for who you are as a person?
Completely, yes, exactly. I was not even interested in the law. It was just because when we came to live in the UK and we were getting political asylum, and I remember the lawyers were Freshfields lawyers from the company my dad had got a job in, and these lawyers came to save us. And I just remember they just looked so smart and swanky, and I thought actually they looked really powerful. And then at that time as well, there were a couple of TV programs, I think it was like Legal, LA Law, that kind of thing. So just glamorizing the law. And the only reason I went to it, because I saw that and I thought that looks really nice to me. Never was there a question of, Sahar, what are your strengths? Is this going to suit you? Are you remotely interested in the law? Are you good at arguing your case? Nothing. There was just absolutely nothing in my personality that would have led me now, the way people think about it, and have the sense of self in a way that would have remotely led me to do law.
And how old were you when you came over, and what was that experience like for you?
I was 11, 12, just turned 12, and I didn't really know the UK as such. We didn't come here much. We went more to France. But my parents made a very early decision, and I'm so grateful. I've lost them both, but I'm very grateful that they said, once you move to a country, we have to become fully British. And so as soon as we came, they were really believe, they used to use this word, you have to burn the bridges behind you. And they didn't believe in any nostalgia or reminiscing about where we came from. And it was very much, we're going to become British and we're going to really belong here and we're going to espouse the culture and embrace the culture and be as British as we can be.
Was it very painful, do you think, for them, even though they put what sounds like a very brave and a positive face on starting a new life in Britain? Do you think it was hard for them to lose and say goodbye to their culture and where they were from?
Absolutely. I think for them, it's just, we came from a very close-knit family and the family was just absolutely scattered all over the world. And for example, the school I went to in Tehran, I think I had 30 of my cousins there, proper cousins, people we were very close to, all very close family friends. And suddenly you come here and you don't know anyone and you're starting a new life. And now as I'm getting older, I just think, gosh, they would have been in their early 30s, what it must have been like for them. But they were just incredibly brave. And the fact that this is my country and I love it so much and I have deep roots here, I'm so grateful. It's because of what they did. And I think because of the sacrifices that they made, that I have such deep roots here. I'm so connected. I have so many friends. I have connections. I really feel I belong. And because of that, I think there were others similar to us that always had one foot there, thinking about, okay, am I going to go back? The nostalgia. And because my parents were quite strict about that, I think they enabled us to have a real chance of living here. And funny enough, since I got married, my husband's very English and he's very deep-rooted English. And in a funny way, he's actually enabled me to connect back more with being Iranian and my Iranian origins. Only since I married him, because I think I'm secure enough, maybe. And I feel that panic of trying to belong is gone.
That's really nice, because I think your parents were probably trying to be really strong and give you some really, really strong roots. And I'm sure in their private moments, that must have been quite difficult for them to do. And your parents sound amazing. And I know your beloved dad passed away rather suddenly, didn't he, in the early 90s. I'm sure that was really difficult for you. And it was that passing, I think, that led you to New York and to what turned out to be a completely different path in your life. Will you take us back to losing Dad, if it's not too difficult to talk about?
I mean, my dad died very suddenly of a stroke. He was 63. And I'd already been, as far as my life goes, I was already been in this law firm. I'd done my 2 years of training and I loved, because when you do, at that time we used to call it being an article clerk, it was great. You went everywhere. You're like, so they had an office in Paris. I went there. Every meeting, you're always taken out to learn. And then once I qualified, I was put in a room with a couple of documents and no one took me anywhere because I was too junior. And it was such a shock because I was like a joker in the party. I was everywhere before. And it was a really amazing law firm at that time, Fred Chumley. And I just remember at that time I qualified and I knew I wasn't doing well because I could see other people were really thriving. And suddenly I was this star article clerk in a way because I really thrived and going everywhere. And suddenly as soon as I qualified, I could tell everyone else there were people shining and really doing well. And I just knew that I wasn't doing well. And I think there's always a correlation between how much you're enjoying yourself and how well you're doing. By definition, if you're loving what you do, you're doing a good job. And I kept getting more and more miserable and I couldn't quite understand. There was like a disconnect. I remember every day when I went in, these feelings. And at that time, again, you couldn't really address your feelings, could you? You would just be like, oh, I don't know why I'm feeling like this, but just move on and get on with it. And then my dad dying very suddenly was just a real jolt. And it was like someone had pulled the rug from under my feet. And I realized that the idea I had of a comfort zone, actually, it doesn't really exist, that life can just change like this overnight. And I think that's what really gave me the bravery that actually I've got to do something about this and maybe do something that I love every day.
I think as well, losing somebody at that age, which is no age these days, is a real reminder of how short life is and how one has to grab life and enjoy it. And perhaps I wonder if that was part of it, that you realised that you weren't thriving in this office environment with a few documents cooped up as a lawyer and you needed to go and do something else. But that led to a trip to visit your brother Bobby, who was in New York at the time.
Exactly. So I went to visit Bobby because I thought maybe I'll just take some time off. Maybe that's what I need. And I'd never taken a gap year or anything. So I'd work straight from school. And that was the famous moment where I woke up with jet lag looking for a cup of coffee. And literally walked into one of these New York style coffee bars, and it was called New World Coffee at that time. It was a predecessor of Starbucks. And I remember just like the smell of coffee, the sound of the hissing of the coffee machine, the frothing of the milk, what I got. The pastries were so delicious. Everything, the cups, the whole way they turned it into this really amazing experience. And I fell in love with it. But again, I fell in love with it as a customer. I was like, wow, this is so cool. Never, ever thinking that this was remotely a business I would start.
But it was the light bulb moment came from Bobby, didn't it? When you told Bobby about these incredible, I think it was skinny lattes that you liked.
Exactly.
And the big selection of what kind of milk. Was it full fat? Was it skinny? Was it soy? Things that I suppose weren't happening in those days here in Britain.
Exactly. And I was just telling him, just the same way as you would, you might go to Greece and go, oh my God, I love how they make their Greek salad or their tiramisu latte. It's amazing. It just wasn't a business idea I was proposing. I was just like, God, that was so great. And especially at that time, I wasn't working. So I was like, God, I wish there was somewhere like that in London that I could go to so that I could start my day there rather than at home making a cup of Nescafe. And that's when my brother got the light bulb and he said, we should do this. And I wasn't having any of it.
Were you not?
No. I was a lawyer. Why would I go and open a coffee bar? Because again, at that time, this concept of entrepreneurship, there are so many people around us that one now sees have started juice bars, coffee bars, nail bars. But no one did that at that time. So you were like, what is that? It was just such an alien idea to me.
You're making me feel better about my Le Pan idea because I lived in New York. I lived in Soho, just around the corner from Grand and West Broadway, which is probably an area you know. And at the time, there was one and one only Le Pan in the world. And it was a lovely coffee, croissant-y hangout. It was in a beautiful loft in Soho, full of cool creatives. You'd see photographers and models and writers. And it was super cool. And I sat there and I thought, wow, this would be amazing in the UK. Gosh, I hope somebody does it. And then when they all popped up all over the place, I look back and think, why did I think that I couldn't do that? And it never occurred to me that maybe I could approach them. You would have really loved it. Big sharing tables. And there's this Brit in New York. I didn't really know many people and I was new to that kind of world. And I used to sit there, have my boiled eggs and my coffee in the morning, think this would be brilliant in Britain. Yes. Somebody must do it.
Absolutely.
And actually I should have done it. So how did Bobby convince you to take that big leap? And then did you quit being a lawyer to do it?
Basically, he said, we should do this, and I wasn't having any of it. And he said, well, actually, by this stage, I'd already left my law firm. And I think, to be honest with you, they would have probably booted me out anyway. I think I was doing such a bad job.
He said you'd become a mediocre lawyer, I think I saw.
Yes, exactly.
I heard you say on a TED Talk.
I'm sure they hadn't quite given me a notice, but I don't think they would have wanted me there for very long. And he said, listen, I want someone to do research for me. Will you do that? Because he was traveling a bit at that time, sorting out a bit of my dad's stuff. And so I said, sure. And then I started doing research, got on the Circle Line the next day. And I went around the Circle Line and I couldn't believe there was nothing like it. And the next day I did some more research and just took another step the next day. And next thing you know, I'm deep into it and just thinking, actually, this is great. I would just take one step and then another step and then another step. And then by that stage, there was quite a lot of momentum around the idea.
It's lovely to hear that that's how Coffee Republic started, because we've all been in there and enjoyed coffees, etc. And to hear you trotting around the Circle Line, doing your investigation, I think you went to America and tried to take pictures in coffee shops of what you liked and how it should look. But it's interesting also to hear some of the steps you went through. I think you were rejected by about 40 bank managers. We look now at Coffee Republic and think what an incredible brand and success story it was. But I love hearing the difficulties and the challenges that you faced. And it just shows that you mustn't give up, because it wasn't easy, was it, when you were
No, exactly.
You were on
I mean, we
this
sort of,
ride?
we physically, I think, went to 20 bank managers, called 40. But always new things are rejected. And it's just understanding that actually, whenever you've got a new idea, people knee-jerk reaction is to say no to it. And it's just that persistence that it takes. Because things seem like a fairy tale, but actually when you go through them day to day, no way was that a fairy tale. Now when I tell the story, it all sounds so sweet, but it kind of forgets about all those moments. Where,
you also say that there were benefits from being clueless. I think that's another quote of yours I like.
Yeah, very much. And I still say that very much. Actually, I've written 3 books, and it's all in the 3 books is that naivety that you need to look at things with fresh eyes and ask stupid questions and not feel like you need to know all the answers. And that's what entrepreneurship taught me, really, because we were new and we were like kids almost. There was that naivety of asking questions, asking stupid questions. And that's what we all need always, right, as we get older, to just keep questioning, keep looking. And I think curiosity, as I get older, I think curiosity is an extraordinarily important trait. And it's not even a trait. It should be a muscle that we all practice.
Yeah, I think we definitely have to practice that. Do you remember the excitement or the nerves of your first coffee bar actually opening?
I remember it. I remember distinctly the night before. I remember being terrified. And still when it opened, it was a nightmare. People were coming in. We had no idea. We didn't get enough milk. And then we had to go to Selfridges Food Hall to buy the milk. And that was Selfridges Food Hall was close by. And they don't really sell milk. They probably sell milk in a very expensive bottle. But we had to go and do that. It was all incredibly chaotic, very scrappy. But we did it, basically. We learned from the first one and then opened another one and then opened another one. So I'm really a great believer in scrappy, right? Like you don't do things perfectly. And if you wait to do them perfectly, you will never do them.
No, and your mum was a big supporter, wasn't she? Didn't she used to come into that first one and have endless cups of coffee?
She did, absolutely. And however many cups of coffee she drank, our sales weren't still great. It took a long time. And that's why I don't believe about overnight success. It takes 15 years to become an overnight success.
What would you say were the biggest lessons you learnt in those early days?
Gosh, in the early days, to be honest with you, it was just a lesson every day. It's like we were the customer ourselves, and it was just changing, doing things every day. We didn't know what it's like to have baristas as employees, have hourly workers, have rotas, had to do all that ourselves. Make sure the deliveries come in on time. Make sure the coffee's fine. Make sure someone's salted the machine. Just a number of nightmares. It was very practical. So you can imagine we were both office workers. My brother was a banker at Lehman. I'd been a lawyer. And suddenly we were at the basement of somewhere looking at, the leaking basement over all the cups that are sitting there stored. So yeah, it's not at all glamorous.
I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it was a wild ride. And why eventually did you sell and turn away from a business that you created from the kitchen table upwards? What was that tipping point for you that you thought now's the time to go?
Well, we opened the first one, and then very quickly in 5 years, we opened 110. So you can imagine it's very fast growth, and we got this bank loan, and then we went on AIM. We were listed on AIM very quickly, because at that time, suddenly, after about 3 years, it became very sexy. And everyone wanted a piece of it, really. Everyone was very excited about it. So suddenly you're the pariah. No one wants to hear about your idea. And suddenly everyone had caught up to the idea and thought it was absolutely brilliant. And on the back of that, we started expanding really quickly and got carried away, especially with the money coming from AIM. But for me, I just could see as we got more people in, as we increased the team, I did at that time, the feeling was when entrepreneurs are great to start businesses, but as you get bigger, you need to bring professionals in. And that was very much the feeling, is like all the stuff you did at the beginning, all that passion, all that customer obsession, all the attention to detail, that's all great, but big companies are run differently. And because of that belief, we started hiring people from big companies. And I could see the culture changing very much. The culture went very much, oh, you can't do this. We've got to set a meeting. You can't call from a store if you've just gone there. Because often my mum and I would go to a store every morning, different stores across London. We had a lot. And then if it was bad, I'd be used to calling up going, oh my God, what's going on in this store? And I remember when we hired professionals, they were like, no, you can't do that. You've got to wait till the next Monday meeting and bring that up. And I was like, what do you mean bring that up? Like that's in 5 days' time and customers are going to have this terrible experience. And it was just such a shock to me, that process, bureaucratic way of running things, that almost old style corporate way. But I was told at that time that there was definitely that feeling that entrepreneurs have a sell by date. And I was the typical entrepreneur who'd stayed too long. And in everyone's eyes, I was hampering the growth of my company because I was still thinking small and these guys were thinking big and they were the grown-ups. And so I left. It felt very alienated from it in a way.
But you believe, I think, I'm right in saying that entrepreneurial culture and keeping that spark alive is possible and really important, no matter how big the business.
Absolutely. And that culture comes from real customer focus. We were the customers ourselves. So if I'm in a store and the store's not running well and there's something terribly wrong with it, with some system they've got, I'm looking at it from the customer point of view. So I'm feeding back to the team from a customer point of view. But when you get those big teams, the customer point of view is something you might look at when your market research comes in, but you're just thinking about, this is how we do things. You're so internally focused. And that's exactly what that lesson I learned from the huge difference in culture from entrepreneurial to corporate. And I could see that at Coffee Republic. You could physically see silos going up, people getting titles, names. This is your job. This is your remit. Then people stop looking at the whole picture, right? And the company loses that soul. I believe companies have souls. And the company loses a soul. It's what drives people, what gets people turning up in a different way.
And how is it possible to keep that soul? Because you mentor people, don't you? And mentor big business leaders and give them your toolkit, if you like, as to how to make sure that entrepreneurial spirit remains despite the size of your company.
Exactly. So for that one, I would say, never forget about the customer. And I've spoken to over 500 companies now. It's amazing how many companies are like, actually, you're right. In a way, we've forgotten about the customer because everyone's in the internal, forgetting about the world out there. And everyone forgets it's the customer that actually pays all the bills ultimately. And it's just like, go back to the customer, see everything from the customer point of view. And then make sure you get rid of all that comfort admin in a way, busy with meetings back to back, and you don't have time to even get out of the office. I saw that at Coffee Republic when we hired a marketing director from a big company. He was so internally focused, he never even had time to go to the stores. I couldn't believe it. Get rid of that, having to know everything, bring back some cluelessness. Start doing things, stop being scrappy again.
It's important, isn't it? In
Yeah.
fact, you wrote a whole book, I think, Startup Forever, How to Build a Startup Culture in a Big Company. So you've obviously got a lot to say on that. And now you've had the benefit of a few more years. Do you look back and wish perhaps you hadn't sold at the time? That's not meant to be a very personal question, but you probably sold because you felt that it was becoming all corporate. But
yeah, no. It was a huge mistake to leave because we loved the company, and the scars of leaving and just seeing the company go down the tube. And 8 years after I left, I remember I was sitting in my house and the radio was on and it had gone into administration, Coffee Republic, 8 years after we left. It's so painful because anyone out there listening who started something will understand the pain of that, because what you're always got the umbilical cord attachment to the business you start. You love it so much. So to feel that you left it and they drove it to the ground 8 years later is a terrible feeling. And I speak to so many founders now, and we all share the same thing because you absolutely love that business and you're so connected to it. So definitely made a mistake, but that's what I've learned from, really. So yeah, I don't really regret it because I've had this extraordinary journey and I've never written the books and done speaking and done everything I've had.
You've done all sorts of things.
But sometimes it's really through the pain of that I had to search again, because I missed it so much because I loved what I did and it was such a creative outlet for me. And everyone who's done something creative knows it's like moving your creative chi sort of thing. And so once you don't have that, it's suddenly, in my horror of horrors, I became a lady who had time for lunch. And I hate ladies who lunch.
No time for lunch. Before we just park at Coffee Republic, because you've done so many other things, I realised I didn't ask you how you came up with the name. Was there a story behind your name?
We were going to call it Java Express, which was such a bad name. And just kept looking. And then suddenly I remember where I was in the car and I was like, it's going to be Coffee Country, Coffee World, Coffee Republic. And maybe I got the idea from Banana Republic.
Or some sort of mishmash,
yes,
like that. You've done amazing things. You do lots of speaking. You've written books. You certainly haven't become a lady who lunches all the time. But another thing that I really love that you've done is you set up an organisation called By Women Built. Tell us about By Women Built.
So when I sold Coffee Republic and I wrote books, and I wrote Anyone Can Do It, and I was speaking about entrepreneurship. And there was a huge entrepreneurship drive in this country at that time when the book came out in the early 2000s. And there was a lot of business links set up and everyone was trying to encourage entrepreneurship, which thank God it did, I think. And then I was doing a lot of the consultancy with big companies. But I always there was something. Number one, people kept saying to me, are you ever going to start something else? And I did start something very briefly. I did something, Skinny Candy, which was a sweets business. I started in the middle, but I really, really missed that, really being creative. But I actually thought that just, I'm never going to be lucky enough. So I'm just going to spend the rest of my life nostalgic about what I did start before and what that was like. And I never thought I'd get the opportunity again to be truly creative. And I don't think I had it in me to actually start a business again, but I wanted that creative turmoil to come back in my life, that creative hardship that's so fulfilling in a way.
It must have made you feel so alive and,
yeah,
and your adrenaline flowing.
I really felt like, and I loved speaking, and I do before I go on stage, and I've spoken to quite big audiences. I get that, but then you get that, you speak, and that's done. And I'm sure you know that from what you do. But then it was just basically during COVID that my speaking had completely stopped. There was nothing. And do you remember everyone was at that time always saying, oh God, are you going to write the novel you always meant to write? And wasn't that all that?
Yeah, that was after you'd cleaned out your spice cabinet and found everything from 2012 that had expired.
Exactly.
There were certain things we all did.
We all did.
And bought the weights to do those at home and did a bit of yoga, the sourdough. And I just remember thinking, gosh, that's funny. People say, do something. I'm not going to do something. I'm not going to do anything. And I remember I actually was putting off a foot operation that I had to have. And I thought, this is the moment. If the surgeon's around, then this is brilliant. I'm going to finally have that foot operation because I can't go anywhere. Especially anyway.
As you remember, like it was in November 2020 when we went back into that dreadful long lockdown. And I remember the surgeon, thank God, could operate. So I had my foot operation. And I was sitting in my house, my foot in front of me, and actually have time to go through my Twitter feed with an open mind. And there's a huge lesson about sometimes when there's a pause, your mind is clear to receive. And because I had the empty mind, I wasn't busy going from one speech and like traveling, doing my board directorship stuff. I remember this tweet came up, and the tweet was, not all of us can invest in women, not all of us can mentor women, but we can all buy from them. And I remember that was pretty powerful because there was lots of conversations around investment. How can you mentor? But I thought actually buying, that's really powerful because I knew quite a few women-built brands. And I thought, surely a great business needs customers. That's the best way to grow, right? Through revenue. And what if we started a movement around buying? And at the same time, the back of my mind was, I remember it was that dreadful murder of Sarah Everard, girls going to Clapham Common with a vigil. It was post-Me Too. There was something. And I think Sarah Everard's murder really shook us all as women.
Oh, it did. It shook the whole nation.
Do you remember? It shook the whole nation.
Yeah,
and there was something that, how can we do something? I don't know. And at that same time, a lot of my goddaughters, nieces, a lot of my friends' children, the effect social media was having on young girls and all these influencers and all the issues that come for young girls' confidence and sense of self-worth from what they see on social media. It all came together in this one tweet and that one moment. And literally when you say light bulb, I remember where I was in the house, literally like a light bulb coming on. I thought, this is really powerful. I just remember there was like a strong force when I read that. And I actually sent an email back to the person that wrote the tweet, someone called Jacqueline de Rockers, who was head of Tech UK. I was like, that's really powerful what you wrote. I love that. Because it was so simple and yet so strong. And then I thought about it and I thought, gosh, we should do something. I'm going to start a movement around this. And at that time, I'd been chatting to someone called Barney McCauley, he was like a real genius marketing. He'd been in all the best advertising companies. And him and I had been chatting about purpose a bit. And I also sent him an email a week later and I went, listen, do you remember you said about purpose? I want to start a movement to buy from women-built brands. Would you join me? Would you help me start this? He had a think and he wrote back to me and said, yeah, I think it's a great idea. Let's do it. And so he was very much that marketing brain of it. I think 2 months later, then Christmas came. And then I started my first Zoom telling people, listen, I want to start this. And it went from there, really.
And so did you start reaching out to female founders and see if there was some appetite for them to join?
I started speaking to people. And I think the worst position you could ever be in a human being is a human being with an idea you're excited about. That is just an idea, because you're completely a pariah, because it's like, oh, brilliant, you're excited about the idea. It's just an idea, right? In your head. And we get 600 ideas. So I remember having lots of Zooms. People were positive and speaking to founders. But founders not that much, because I was worried that I'll lose credibility, because I'd be like, what is she doing? So I spent the whole year doing what I preach people not to do, asking people for advice, asking, what should I do? Do you want to come and support it? And after a year, I felt so drained. I remember Christmas was coming and I was like, oh, I've just had 1 year of Zooms on this idea. I'm never going to do it. I'm going to take my husband. This is just ridiculous. This is never going to happen. It's a great idea, but there's just a whole graveyard of brilliant ideas. I don't even know how to start this. This is just impossible. I'm going to give this up. I can't continue having Zooms and not getting anywhere. And then I remember actually Barney, my co-founder, he was like, I think you should start a WhatsApp group with the founders you know. And then the founders I knew, like, they're all pretty big founders. I was a bit worried about getting them on a WhatsApp group. So I happened to sit on a panel for this investment company as a favor to my nephew. And I remember I had 3 female founders on it. And I didn't know them. And I just thought that's much easier to ask someone you don't know. So I said, listen, I'm starting a movement to buy from women-built brands. I'm going to start WhatsApp. And there and then, I remember I went to the loo and started the group. And I was like, can I put you on this WhatsApp? And the 3 of them were the first people on the WhatsApp. And I was like, I'm starting a movement. And you can imagine, very embarrassing, starting a movement with 3 people on a WhatsApp group.
It has to start somewhere.
That's the thing. And I started someone else, and that was really exciting. And then someone else. And then I remember by this stage we had 10 people on the WhatsApp group. And I had a coffee at the Anya Cafe, that Anya Heinmarsh, who was so supportive. She said, you know what, invite them, I'll host them at the Anya Cafe. And Anya's so busy, she never does that, but it's incredibly kind of her. And I just remember at that time, the restrictions were lifted and we could be out. And I saw how these founders were sharing with each other, these women. And I can't believe they didn't know each other. And I was like, you're all the founders of big brands. How come you've never met? And they were just sharing. They were sharing like mad. They were chatting like mad. And I remember thinking, this is extraordinary. What is happening here? Some sort of magic is taking place here. Which is really the irony, Helen, that people say women are so bad at networking. We always think there's the golf club culture, isn't there? And yet actually women are brilliant at networking, because we just chat. We just chat away. We love chatting. Chatting's like our therapy. So that's really, from that one coffee morning, they got excited. They told others. The WhatsApp group grew to about 80. And then from that, bit by bit, it's grown. So now we've had 2,400 applications. That's from, basically, if you imagine UK only, women who have started a consumer brand, raising their hand and going, hey, I'm Women Built. I started this brand. This is me. This is my brand. We've got a community of over 1,000. We've got the first aisle in Ocado. Ocado, I know, is digital, but they do have aisles, the digital aisle. So we have the first digital aisle in Ocado. We took over the whole of Whole Foods, Planet Organic. I was on QVC last night. We've got a special hour on QVC. We took over the TikTok shop. Retailers are starting to think differently as well. And this is not about some tokenism of buy from women just because you have to. It's actually, we're missing a trick if young girls or any kind of women, we don't know how many of the brands are started by women.
I was quite surprised because I went onto the By Women Built website. I didn't know, for example, I've spent many an hour swinging from ropes at places like Go Ape. Go Ape, I didn't know was founded by a woman. Not that I never actually thought, is it a man or a woman? But I was like, oh, Go Ape was founded by a woman.
Absolutely.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith is another of my favourite brands that's on there. And then Seep, lovely Laura Hartnett, who lots of people probably now have seen on Dragon's Den. I met Laura recently in Hammersmith. 8 entrepreneurs spoke for 8 minutes and asked her to do the podcast. And she's wonderful. And her journey and her story and Seep are part of your Ocado Isle and your organisation. Who inspires you, and what stories that you've come across, particularly in the female entrepreneur world, have really had a big effect on you, Sahar? I'm sure there's lots of them.
What I find extraordinary about this group is that because they're all entrepreneurs, they've all had an idea and they have just gone for it, right? So there's no posturing or sharp elbows. It's extraordinary. They are so different. They couldn't be more different than each other in background, shape, size, color, personality. I've just never seen a group that can be more different age, and yet they share this one fundamental thing. And it's almost like the saying we have at By Women Built is great things come to those who work their asses off. And those women they just work hard. It's just pure grit. And they share that journey of grit, of having an idea. Because if you think about it, each of them saw something. 98% of them have started the business from a personal need. So it's something that they couldn't find for themselves. Be it someone's child had eczema, that's Joanna from Child's Farm, be it someone's was missing something that they couldn't find. They acted on that idea, right? As we know, it's not easy acting on an idea. The whole world's against you, like obstacle course. But they made it through and they got their product out to the market. And they share that. And the fact that these women didn't know each other and now they've got a safe space where they can talk to each other and obsess about their products. Because what I always say is, I think founders, they love their product so much. You can just talk about it forever, their business, their product issues. And I think, and I can say that for all our founders, is your partner in life or your best friend, they can hear it a bit, but they can't hear it the whole time because they just would never relate the amount you want. Whereas actually By Women Built is a safe space. Well, they can just come and just bring it all out to each other and they will listen because they're women and they're great at networking and they're great at chatting. So it's just created a really lovely peer-to-peer community of support and collaboration. And now we've got a platform, it's an app that they can ask each other questions. Often someone's like, okay, actually, I need to do that. What do you think? What's your solution? Where can I find so-and-so? Sharing addresses with each other, collabing with each other. It's incredible. They come together and sometimes hire one designer. It's a real stronger together, truly. And just, it's amazing the amount of activity that goes on.
Oh, it sounds incredible. And also being able to swap notes and questions. And did you do that? And what were the pitfalls here? It's absolutely a no-brainer when you talk about it now and you go back to that tweet that you saw. It's incredible. There was nothing like it out there. And am I right in thinking that investment and funding, and there are stats to illustrate this, is much, much harder if you're a female founder to secure?
The official stat is like 2p out of every pound goes to female founders. In terms of investment, we tend to stay away from that whole conversation around investment. Another reason I started By Women Built was I was part of the Rose review that Alison Rose, who was CEO of NatWest, did about female entrepreneurship. And I think people don't realize that quite surprisingly in the UK, our rates of female entrepreneurship are 30% below countries like Canada, the United States, and Netherlands, for example. And that 30% costs the UK economy 200 billion.
Wow.
So could you imagine? So if we just had not parity with men, because only 1 out of 3 entrepreneurs are female, but if we had parity with what they have in other countries in terms of their rates of female entrepreneurship compared to men, 200 billion in the economy. So it's what we're missing out on. And I think women are held back much more by confidence than capability.
So how can we change that?
You can't be what you can't see, right? So if you can't see how many women have started businesses, is all you hear about is the fact that the old 2p out of every pound goes to women-built businesses. It's not going to encourage more women starting, is it?
No.
So my idea was actually, let's move away from that conversation of what women haven't got. Let's just show them. Let's literally shine a light. So if there are 139 of them sitting in Ocado, let's say, actually, by the way, a woman is behind this. And that's how you change things, I think.
That's much more powerful, I think, than saying negative figures. It's turning that into a positive, isn't it? Saying, look at what these founders, look at what these female founders are doing, and hopefully will inspire other young women. My daughter's 21 and just leaving university, and I said to her, all that's important to me is that you love and enjoy what you do, and that you don't stick your head down for 40 years in a job you don't like, looking for that retirement. Every day of my career, with very few exceptions, I can honestly say I've loved what I do, and do love what I do, and have no intention of stopping it. And I think that's really important, isn't it? So we can inspire the next generation too, if we're shouting loud about what amazing female entrepreneurs there are. And actually, if you think about it, when you say to people, name a few entrepreneurs, it's always the Richard Bransons, and it's usually the male.
Absolutely. There was a recent survey that we always use is 80% of 11 to 18-year-olds can't name a single female entrepreneur. because they're not famous now, I suppose, because of Dragon's Den. Lovely Sarah Davis is on there and Deborah Meaden. And we know what we have is we have a kite mark on the products, which is what I always wanted. And so now I was in Whole Foods the other day, and it's just extraordinary the amount of products. And I actually took a butter and I thought, I think she's in Buy One Built. And I turned the butter around and had Buy One Built on it. And I've never really had it on butter. We've had it on many things. And I was so happy. And my idea is that some young girl who perhaps doesn't believe how extraordinary she is going to look and go, oh my God, a woman started that and a woman started that. And then slowly she's going to realize, maybe if I've got an idea, maybe I can do it too.
I think you should do your own podcast series. You've got 2,000 founders there. You've got 2,000 stories to kick you off. It would be extraordinary to tell those stories, I think, on a podcast.
Yes, I've thought about it. So again, it's just something I've got to do. We sort of keep talking about it.
It's on your list of things to do.
Oh my God, exactly. And I've just got to do it and start it small. But yeah, no one knows as good as you in interviewing, I have to say.
Oh, you're very sweet. But Buy Women Built, your eyes light up. Does it give you that sense of fulfillment and excitement and adrenaline that perhaps you missed post Coffee Republic days?
Oh God, I absolutely love it. And it's very much something which it just literally, for me, is just about the purpose. And I just get so much out of it. I didn't start it as a commercial venture. And the amount of fulfillment, I don't know, I never had children. So, and if I did, I would have wanted daughters. And I'm like, a Buy One Built, gosh, I've got, 2,000 of them. And it's a really lovely feeling. I just adore them. And they are just extraordinary. The only problem we've got is they act so quickly, Helen, that if we put something on the app and say we're looking for something, they act on the speed of light. I'm like, how did you even have time to read that, to answer and have the stuff ready? If we say we want doing a goodie bag for something, literally the next day in my house, I get the delivery. They're just the most extraordinary women and we get so inspired by them. And they power it. They genuinely powering me in my life because I'm just so lucky to be in the orbit of these extraordinary women.
I'm sure they feel very lucky to be in the orbit of you as well. And I think it would be nice to end a bit about the fact that you believe that we could all grow into an entrepreneur. We all have dreams and ambitions that we think, oh, I could never achieve that. But what would you say to people listening, Sahar, who think, gosh, I've got an idea, but I'm not the right person to develop it, or I don't think I could take that leap? Because as your book title suggests, anyone can do it, can't they?
Absolutely. I think we've all got entrepreneurial qualities that need to come out, right? And you don't know about them if you've never had an idea and had to use them. So that's the point. It's almost like the qualities are there, but they're sitting, you're not using. It's a muscle you're not using. But as soon as you get an idea, you have to just think out the box the whole time and think creatively and make 2 + 2 = 10 every single day. So you end up drawing on those qualities that you don't even realize you have. So as a part of self-realization, it's extraordinary. But my biggest advice, and I think you were looking for sort of what is the one phrase I can leave everyone with, and genuinely when I think about it, it is leap and the net will appear. The reason why people don't start is you've just got to leap. You've just got to take the jump. And if you take the jump, you will then figure it out along the way. But if you just keep thinking about it, the reason I said the story of Buy One Built is 1 year of Zooms, talking to every single person who's got any influence. I'm not leaping, right? I'm just talking, getting opinions, making sure it works, trying to put it all out on paper. When I started that WhatsApp group, I took the leap. It was really scary, but I took the idea into the physical world, something that could develop. And so I took it out of my head into a WhatsApp group. And that was a leap I took. The same with Coffee Republic. We said we're going to open a store, started writing the business plan. So I think my biggest advice is leap and then that will appear, because you will never know unless you jump. And when you jump, you figure it out along the way.
And I watched a TED Talk that you did actually on Coffee Republic, and there were some fantastic slides, because you're like me, you're a bit of a noodler and a scribbler and a drawer. I always have a disposable black ink pen in my hand, and usually I'm covered in ink. But I always noodle and draw and scribble, and I'm a visual learner. And if I've got an idea, I have to visually do it. I can't send something.
Yeah, you have to get it on paper,
I have to get it on paper. I can't do it on an attachment or something like that. I have to physically do it. And if you do take that leap, it's an adventure, isn't it? It's a wonderful adventure awaits with challenges and joys and difficult times. But I'm guessing it makes you totally feel alive and back to that curiosity as well, isn't it, I suppose?
Exactly, because I think the worst place in the world is actually on the edge of the cliff, not taking the leap and asking people, should I take the leap? Just imagine white knuckles, you're looking down and you just mustn't look down. You just must just go for it. And that really is one thing in terms of writing my books, in terms of speaking, even when you say podcast, I've just got to go ahead and do the first one. Planning is the worst thing that we can do. And actually my team are slightly like, I'm a bit counterintuitive like that, but I just don't really believe in, especially in this day and age, things are moving so fast. You just go and do something.
Well, I think my message to you, Sahar, I never leave my guests with a message from me. I love you leaving us on Leap and a Net Will Appear. And I think on your podcast, you'd be an amazing host. I think you should leap and that net will appear. And I think you should have a By Women Built podcast that we can all listen to. A new today would be amazing. I've been so looking forward to chatting to you. And thank you for trekking across town to our lovely music studio where we are today and for making that effort, because I know how packed your diary is. But you're a wonderful lady. It's lovely to meet you.
Helen, lovely. It was gorgeous chatting to you. Thank you.
You've been listening to the powerhouse that is Sahar Hashemi OBE. We didn't mention the OBE. That's very important. Unlikely entrepreneur, founder of Coffee Republic and also By Women Built, and an absolute leader and inspiration in her field. If you harbour dreams of starting your own business, then Sahar's book, Anyone Can Do It, is a must-read. Download and subscribe to our series at convex.podbean.com or search The Convex Conversation on Spotify or wherever you listen to yours. I'll be back next week with another great guest. Join me then.